I appreciate UVU and all that you are doing to bring so many different people together for such an important cause. I am just, I want all of the Big Ocean members who are here today just to stand up really quick. I want to recognize all of the women who are part of this amazing organization who came out here today. It's very much a team effort, and so the spirit in which I'm going to be presenting today is the spirit of Big Ocean, and we are very much heart and human-to-human connection. And so one of the things that was asked today was, what is the relevance of the UN Sustainable Development Goals going into the future? And I recall maybe 5 years ago or so when there were just a seemingly handful of people that you could share, experiences happening at the United Nations with the Millennial Development Goals, and nobody knew what that was. And so you'd have to sit and explain to them. And now, post-2015, going into the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the progress has been exponential to the point where you have people coming from all different sectors, from the private sector and from the NGO sector, all talking about the Sustainable Development Goals. And so it's been fascinating to see the speed at which these are becoming really, really relevant in our everyday lives. And so I echo what Sam had said previously, just to become very informed about what these goals are. I recommend you, checking out the goals at the websites and learning what safe cities are and learning what, social protection systems are and what the individual targets are. I think that it's very eye-opening, and I think that it's an education that would benefit us all moving into the future as these goals continue to become more and more part of our everyday lives. And so this is a picture of my family, and like I said, in the spirit of Big Ocean, I just want to connect with you. I'm originally from Brazil, and I immigrated to the United States when I was around 7 years old for religious purposes. And my family is very much a part of who I am. It's because of my upbringing with my parents and our religiosity that created a very stable foundation for our family who did not know the language at the time, who did not have a way to provide for ourselves at the time. So when we moved to the United States, having a religious faith community and being very, very integrally connected as a family gave us the resilience that we needed to not only survive, but to thrive. And being here at at UVU, I have to give my brother a little shout out. So my brother's name is Fabio, and his sweet wife, my sister-in-law, Krista, who happens to be the niece of President Tumines. He had an excellent start here at UVU, and 13 years later, he's now in the final stages of securing his job as a cardiothoracic surgeon. And so from the beginnings here at UVU and from the excellent education he received, he was able to really excel in the field of medicine. And he would also agree with me categorically that it was because of our faith and our family structure that allowed him to not only survive, but thrive. And so this is my family. I have 7 children. Hashtag postcards for Macron. And I graduated from the University of Utah in philosophy. And at that time, as I was engaged in my learning, and as I felt deeply empowered by my faith and my family and my capacity to be a nurturer and a creator as a woman, I had yet to find any women's studies text or feminist text that included that perspective. There was nothing. Still to this day, I look and I search to find something that includes women's perspectives of faith, family, and motherhood. And it just isn't really available. So for a long time, I felt a philosophical homelessness. And I want to express to you what that did to me. It made me feel completely disengaged from where things were happening that were eventually going to be affecting me. For example, things that are happening at the United Nations. I did not feel like I had a place. I did not feel like I had a voice. I did not feel like my perspectives mattered. And so there was a real feeling of disengagement because of that. When you don't feel like you belong at the table or you have a voice at the table. So for many years, I want to say a span of 12, 13 years, this was my feeling. I felt completely disengaged, completely frustrated, because I felt like what I was doing already within the walls of my home and my community was invisible. Nobody cared. Nobody saw a thing. Yet I could see the results every day that what I was doing mattered. And so I struggled, and for a really long time, it was a painful experience for me. This is my sister-in-law, Moana. My husband is Polynesian, he's Hawaiian Tongan, and this is his older sister, Moana. She was never married, never had children. When she passed away of cancer in 2012, we flew out to her funeral. And it was the first time I had been away from the kids, and as I was looking out the window of the airplane, all of these feelings of frustration with the question, what is power? Who has it? All of these things started coming back to me, and so I started ruminating on all of these philosophically really deep issues related to feminism. And so the upshot for me for many years was, feminism is about power. Who has power? And I always felt like, well, I have power. I have internal power, and it's coming from my faith tradition. It's coming from my family. It's coming from this internal compass within me. All of these things, I felt powerful. It's just, I couldn't express it in the public square. There was no place for me. So we land, we directly go to her funeral, and we walk in, and it was packed with people. You couldn't even find room to walk. Everyone kept coming up to my husband and I saying, did you know that Moana did this? Did you know that Moana did? She did all of these amazing things that was truly nurturing to this entire community, that changed the entire community. And we noticed a big group of men coming in, and they just walked around together, and we were wondering what the connection was with Moana. And as the pallbearers were getting ready to take the coffin out into the courtyard, they stopped the procession, and they said, we want to offer one last haka for Moana. And what proceeded to happen has always remained with me, where 8 big, strong, very powerful men declared their love and devotion through the haka to their fallen sister. And they cried, and they wept. And at that moment in time, it solidified to me what true power really was, and that she had it. And as I came back to my parents-in-law house, I couldn't sleep all night. I just kept thinking about that experience. And so at 5 a.m., I got up out of my bed, I walked to the ocean side, and I finally threw my hands in the air and said, God, give me something. I have been struggling with this for years. Where is my place? Where do I belong? I know I have power, but just how can I express it when it's not visible to anybody else? And so at that moment, I felt like I just needed to be still and be quiet. And so I started walking along the ocean side, and I noticed a big cluster of rocks. So I climbed on top of the rocks, and I looked below the rocks, and I could see these small little waves brushing up against the water. And I started thinking about the waves of feminism. First wave, second wave. And then I started thinking, I sometimes feel like this silly, insignificant little wave, not doing very much. But then when I looked closer, I could see that everywhere that the water touched shaped that rock. It shaped the surface. And every single little wave washing upon the shore shaped the landscape. And it was at that moment, right when the sun was beginning to rise, that I stood on this rock and I looked out over the entire big ocean. And I realized that every woman is like a wave in the ocean, and that we are all woven together, that we ebb and flow, and that we all have internal power, and that we must stand together as this unified body to create and shape the landscape of humanity. So it became very crystal clear in my mind. And so for a long time, I just had this idea, big ocean, big ocean. That was my philosophical home that I'd been longing for. But then how do you create something around a philosophical idea? Well, we created it. because it wasn't just me alone out there. It was a vast majority of the women of the world who were not presently being represented or being brought to the table, because 58% are mothers. And like I said, where are the feminist texts that include perspectives on motherhood in an empowered way? You couldn't find any. 83% of the women of the world identify with the faith tradition. Where are the texts that show me that faith can empower women from the inside? And all of us come from families, specifically when we're talking about indigenous populations, populations in the global south, and women who need empowerment the most and who need to have a voice the most. When you exclude all of these women, can you really achieve the Sustainable Development Goals? Can you effectively bring all the women to the table? One of the most important presentations that I had witnessed at the United Nations was entitled Every Woman, Every Child. And I sat in that and I said, but is it really including every woman if we cannot bring our perspectives to the table and be taken with legitimacy and with instead of a patronizing tone, if we can be given a voice? And so these are things that have really inspired the birth of Big Ocean Women and the work that we do. And so this is why Big Ocean is increasingly ever so relevant in today's world. It's because truly, if we are going to include a majority of the women of the world, we have got to give value to their everyday lived experiences. Instead of looking at them as victims and as those that are oppressed, we can be looking at them as the leaders and as the women who are creating the changes within their communities. So this is a catalyst. This philosophy is a catalyst to create the kind of growth that we need in the world today. And so, just briefly, Big Ocean is unique because we work from the top and from the bottom. There are some organizations that are top down and some that are strictly bottom up, but we have both. From the top down, meaning that we attend these international conferences as leaders, as members, and as young women who are just wanting to get involved. And we go and we listen to what is happening. We open our eyes, we educate ourselves on some of these global issues that members within our human family are facing. And then we become inspired by those stories. We talk to the women, we connect with them. We say, what kinds of implementations are really working in your communities? What ways are you making the difference? What ways are you changing your community for the better? And so we get inspiration from one another. So we make that human-to-human connection every time we go. We're not so much data-driven and outcome-driven. We're driven by the outcomes of the heart that sometimes are very invisible, but nevertheless critical moving forward. And then we come back and we organize around what we call cottages or local chapters, where we discuss tenets that empower us, where we look at the actual needs of the communities around us. And then in a very empowered way, instead of saying, what can I get? We sit down and deliberate together and think about, what can I give? What can I offer? How can I make a difference in this area? We have millions of stories of these cottages coming together, organizing, strategizing, going out into their communities and making a difference in their own unique way. The Sustainable Development Goals and their targets are very specific, but one thing I want to make very, very clear is that we have got to remember that as we are moving forward and trying to tackle all of these social ills together, that we give space for the unique contributions and then the unique ways that people are problem solving, that are creative and that aren't part of these big NGO strategies or whatnot, but that are coming from the heart and that are being expressed in the most pure way, which is human-to-human interaction. And so that's what we do. And I just really appreciate, just like what Sam said, just being in a room full of people that care is huge. It's huge. And so what Big Ocean can offer the rest of the world is to tap into that. It's to make women realize that they are accepted at the table and that their voice does matter. And when that happens, women can get engaged. women can then say, I have something to offer. I'm not just a victim. I'm not the one that's constantly being oppressed. I can do something. And when it just takes one woman, one small wave. And what happens is she'll bring her family along. She'll bring her friends along. Women are the glue of society because of our natural capacity to network and collaborate. And so when you can motivate one woman to look within herself, just what Choice Humanitarian does, is this internal power. When you can switch that on and ignite that in someone, you have deep impact. Not spread out impact, it's deep, it's profound. And that's what true sustainable change is all about. So in closing, we just want to share with you a video about our recent delegation to the United Nations. Thank you very much.